Becky.
And hello, moms, dads, and all caregivers out there.
Welcome back for our second episode of Parenting Through Trauma.
Today, we get to introduce you to the first of 4 guests, 4 amazing moms who will be sharing their stories.
And each has so much to share with us.
That's right. As Erin and I see it, our most important job is simply to facilitate by helping our guests share their stories in the most impactful way possible. Their stories are full of wisdom, the wisdom of experience.
Yeah, and another part of our job will be to reinforce the ideas and themes that we know will keep coming up as we move from episode to episode.
Okay, so let's get to know our first guest. Tracy is a mom of 2 children, a daughter and a son, both in elementary school. The family lives in a town of a few thousand residents in northern New England.
This is a family that stays busy. They love the outdoors. They love hiking together. They love travel. Kids are athletic. Here's Tracy.
The kids are very active in sports. My daughter does hockey and horseback riding. My son does the whole gamut. He does baseball, basketball, football, and kung fu.
Things are pretty busy in the home as well. In addition to the 4 humans, there's a dog, a cat, guinea pigs, and chickens.
We call it our crazy farm.
That sounds like a lot to keep up with.
And one day, there was even more to keep up with.
So my daughter and I were involved in a car accident. An impaired driver crossed the center line, and we avoided a head-on collision, but still hit us pretty hard.
Okay, so a scary and a serious car accident with Tracy and her elementary school daughter Amy in the car together.
Right, an impaired driver on the wrong side of the road.
It was late at night, and after the collision, the car called 911, all of that. Ambulance came.
Fortunately, Amy was able to just walk away, but Mom needed some medical attention while Amy watched.
She watched them, pull me out of the car, backboards, neck collars, cutting my clothes off, starting IVs, all of that.
Tracy and Amy both went to the hospital by ambulance. Dad arrived a bit later, and Amy was able to go home.
Amy suffered a concussion. Tracy suffered some physical injuries, significant, but not terrible.
Thank goodness the physical injuries weren't any worse.
Right, but there's also the trauma of the car accident, an event that Tracy and Amy are likely to remember forever. So not long after the car accident, Amy started to show some responses to the trauma. Becky, will you walk us through those?
Absolutely. For starters, Amy started feeling some specific fears.
2 major ones. One was just anything around getting in the car. Just very fearful for her.
In fact, for several weeks, Amy didn't want to go anywhere in the car. She cried a lot. The highway where the accident occurred was especially difficult for Amy, so the family had to use back roads for a while. And here's the second fear.
But also separating from me. She became excessively attached to me, separation anxiety, wanting to know where I was going, when I'd be back, like down to the minute.
Down to the minute. Where's Mom? Where's Mom now? The constant need to know led to Amy making a request.
It was, hey, can I bring a cell phone to school so I can text you? That was really the hardest part because we don't have those cell phones for her or in school or anything. So trying to provide support without changing our entire life around it.
Amy also started acting out in ways that were kind of confusing at first.
Putting her socks on in the morning to go to school became a production. And as we learned more about it, it was if she gets her socks on, she goes to school, we're separated from each other.
There were some other challenging behaviors as well.
She would shut down, she would just kind of regress into herself and really didn't cope, and her coping became the meltdowns. She'll still have these emotions where she just is crying, and then she'll start throwing things off, like just her bed. She'll like completely disassemble her bed and throw the blankets on the floor and all of that. To be completely frank, she really did not show healthy coping skills at all.
These symptoms were difficult for the entire family, but there were some hopeful signs. For example, Amy began to understand her own needs.
And it was actually amazing. She had the insight that she didn't want me to drop her off from school because it would be harder to leave me. Versus getting on the bus, she couldn't make a production over it. She just had to get on.
So what's your reaction so far, Erin?
Well, the way Amy responded to trauma was really normal. Little kiddos, they don't know what to do when they face big emotions. They aren't born with coping skills. They do the best they can, and they will behave in some challenging ways.
And it may take time to figure it all out.
Also, note that Amy's fears are connected to fundamental psychological needs for safety, for love. Is the highway safe? Is the person who provides me so much love my mom? Is she nearby? Is she okay?
And this is really common. Trauma can threaten mental health at these really foundational levels, sort of like an earthquake shakes a house, right at the foundation.
So, parents need to attend to these needs by providing lots and lots of reassurance and lots of love. How about if I take the next segment, Becky?
Great.
So over time, Amy started to figure out some ways to deal with those big emotions.
She goes and jumps on the trampoline for a little while and expels some of that anxious energy.
There was the trampoline, plus the guinea pigs named Kevin and Bob. Both helped to calm Amy. Tracy learned to encourage these activities.
So mostly it's reminders. It's, do you need to go outside? Do you need Kevin or Bob? Or sometimes when she's really worked up, I'll just grab one of the guinea pigs and just bring it to her and put it in front of her, and then she'll scoop it up.
And after a while, Amy no longer needed reminders.
And she knows when to seek those things. She knows when to go grab a guinea pig and sit down for a few minutes.
But sometimes she still couldn't deal with the strong emotions. She behaved in ways that were really hard for the family.
It became exhausting. And I'll be honest, neither my husband nor I always responded the best because it was exhausting, and it was, she would wind up with these meltdowns that you would expect of a 2-3-year-old toddler. And sometimes that's really hard because I want to say, you can't do that. You can't destroy things. So then sometimes we would put really hard lines in place, which obviously didn't make things better. We were all just trying to survive it. So yes, it was some trial and error, and again, not some of my proudest mom moments, but we all get there.
So Tracy struggled at times, but she also learned how to look at Amy's meltdowns a little bit differently.
I think the most impactful thing that was said to me was, it's not a behavior, it's an unmet need. So when they're acting out, when they're having problems, what are they telling you? When I could reframe what I was seeing and say, okay, what is the need? What is the problem behind this? We were able to grow and move a lot. I'm not saying we are always great with it. There's still moments that it's...
Tracy also learned that sometimes her best move as a parent was to back off, even though that could lead to some inconvenience.
And then the other big thing is space and respecting her space. And I think that's a very hard thing to do sometimes. When she says, I need a minute, is giving her that minute. We let her have that space. We know she's safe, even if she's, destroying her bed and pulling it apart. She needs to release it to come down and then process. It doesn't help having me in there all the time. A lot of it also came from I could identify that I was starting to build up and I was going to lose my temper. So by giving her space, I was giving myself space to take some breaths.
Backing off of it also meant learning to interact with Amy a little differently.
And that has been a huge thing for me, is to talk less, listen more. Instead of telling her what to do, having her and I work through a solution together.
So, Becky, what makes an impression on you here?
I think what stands out the most is the way that Tracy learned to guide Amy toward helpful coping strategies.
Yeah, the trampoline, the guinea pigs.
Right, and the way she learned to tolerate what lots of people would consider difficult behaviors.
Right, like tearing up the bed.
Also, I really loved what Tracy said about responding to challenging behaviors. Instead of reacting to the misbehavior or trying to correct the misbehavior, she became curious.
It's like she became an investigator.
Yeah, she tried to understand the unmet need that was the cause of the behavior. And to do that, she had to, as she put it, talk less and listen more.
So, Becky, so far, we've only talked about the immediate family unit, especially Tracy and Amy.
Yeah, but they weren't alone. Actually, support started to pour in right away. Extended family drove in from a few hours away to help out for a bit, and a church group provided meals to the family for a while.
And this kind of support, of course, helped for a few weeks, but
dealing with trauma takes a lot longer than a few weeks.
Yeah, so pretty soon, the family was mostly on its own.
At first, the family didn't want to ask for help.
We also were not ones to reach out for a lot of support. Other than my family, we didn't really reach out for much.
Maybe they felt some pride in being independent, handling their own problems, and I bet some listeners out there can relate to that. As time passed, though, Tracy did start to ask for help more often. Sometimes she felt like she couldn't avoid it. For example, in social situations, Tracy started talking with other parents about how Amy was doing.
So when we do have get-togethers with certain groups of friends, I will preface to the parent, please be aware, she needs some space sometimes. She may get a little angry here and there. Please don't think it's against your children or that your children did something wrong. And, everyone's been very receptive and open to that.
Talking with other parents became more comfortable with practice.
We're all going through things. Everyone's got their own struggles. Nobody is doing this without a problem. Parenting is hard.
And as she became more comfortable, she started to see that talking about what was going on was helping.
Well, some people think of anxiety as a bad thing and they kind of want to keep it hush-hush. We've been very open with everybody. She's got anxiety, she's got trauma. We see it in these places, and this is the best way to deal with it. Presenting her as she is has been a big benefit instead of trying to keep it hush-hush. Luckily, we are in a small town, a very understanding town.
In addition to other parents, Tracy also spoke with the leaders of the activities that Amy participated in.
With her hockey coaches, and we've said this is kind of what she's dealing with, and this is how we see it sometimes. And they've been very understanding and respectful.
It usually went well, but it didn't always go well.
We've moved different trainers and things like that because some people don't understand that a behavior isn't just a behavior. And it's often attributed to her being bad.
And when that happened, Tracy took decisive action.
When that's been a problem, we have just removed that from her life.
Tracy also worked to find a suitable therapist for Amy.
It was hard for us to find counselors.
And even when she did find help, it wasn't a perfect fit.
Not the most responsive to the counselor, but we kept going for quite some time.
Eventually, Tracy found effective support from an unexpected source.
It's not until we started occupational therapy with her that we started to see her kind of develop some coping strategies. They really worked on developing a toolbox for her of coping skills. They used a lot of the emotional regulation, the stoplight signs, and the color codes.
So, Erin, what caught your attention in this segment?
It is so common for parents to shy away from asking for help. But notice that once Tracy got comfortable doing it, it did help.
In fact, Tracy said this.
Finding that support at an earlier time would have been easier.
Now, that doesn't mean that finding the support you need is a simple task. For example, it can be hard to find just the right therapist.
Right. You might need to be persistent, and that can be really hard for some people. And not only that, you might want to try different kinds of therapy, like occupational therapy or art therapy.
And it's important to recognize that some adults in your network of friends and neighbors simply don't have a lot of experience with or understanding of trauma.
Right. So some people, even close friends who want to help, they may struggle to connect with what you're experiencing. They may not be able to support you in every way that you might want.
In that case, you have to look elsewhere, like Tracy did when one of Amy's coaches didn't seem to understand her situation.
But of course, the bigger point about trauma is nobody gets through it alone.
It's okay to ask for help.
More than okay. It's really important.
So, Erin, by now, I bet a lot of our listeners are wondering, what about school?
No doubt. And yes, as Tracy started talking with more people, she started talking to teachers and other professionals at Amy's school.
We did eventually bring in school and teachers for more support there, which has made a huge difference as well. They really came in and built the IEPs around anxiety.
IEP stands for Individualized Education Plan, a term used in public schools. It's a plan for meeting the learning needs of a specific child. So here's one example of what can be included in an IEP.
When she gets overwhelmed in the classroom, she's allowed to take her work into the hallway in a quieter space. Or when she tests, she goes to a smaller room so that, she's not looking around and seeing other friends are done, and then that means she's not, and something's wrong there.
Another important outcome was that Amy began having regular conversations with the school psychologist.
Yeah, so the first thing that they put in place is she started working with their school psychologist, and that was a huge support for her. She immediately connected with her personally, and they built a really, really strong relationship.
The psychologist became a source of stability for Amy when she had to adapt to changes in the school.
The separation problem became around moving teachers, leaving teachers, things like that, which is why the school psychologist really became a huge component in supporting her there, because she knew that regardless of what class she moved to or anything like that, her school psychologist was always going to be the same.
As time passed, Amy began to learn how to manage her own situations.
So we've worked on her advocating for herself. Like when she is a substitute teacher and it's overwhelming, she goes in and she says, I have an IEP. I need to take my work outside.
The school psychologist seems to have played a really important role here, Erin.
Yeah, the family had some good fortune here. First, the public school had resources. Second, Amy and the psychologist got along so well.
Also, Tracy did the work, advocating for Amy and lining up the resources she needed.
She did indeed. So Becky, we've talked all about Amy's trauma, but not at all about Tracy's. Mom was in a serious, scary car accident too.
Right. So let's turn to some of the emotions that Tracy has been dealing with.
This gentleman made a choice that has affected our family and my daughter for a big part of her life. And I think that's what's hard for me, is letting go of that anger.
Tracy's anger worsened when the driver that caused the accident seemed to just vanish. Naturally, she wanted to see some accountability. Tracy was frustrated with how long the legal process dragged on and on.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'd be really angry and frustrated.
Yeah, I bet most people would be. At first, Tracy tried to ignore these emotions so she could give all of her attention to Amy. But eventually, she did seek her own help.
I did go to counseling myself as well, which definitely did help. But we probably could have, looking back, reached out for more support.
It's important to get help because emotions like intense frustration or anger can have a big impact on the way that you show up as a parent. Over time, Tracy adapted.
We can't control anybody else but ourselves. And I can control my response and I control my emotions around it to allow the growth. I can't control everybody else, but I can control what we do and the joy we find.
You know, Becky, these statements are really good examples of healthy post-traumatic growth.
I agree. Trauma can be humbling. It confronts you with the difficult reality that you cannot control everything in your life.
But you can mostly control how you respond, and you can continue to seek joy.
Which Tracy loves to do by focusing on outings and trips with her family.
And there's additional illustrations of healthy post-traumatic growth. Here's Tracy commenting on how Amy has grown.
She's learned a lot of good coping mechanisms, and I hope that she finds a way to keep using those as life modifies.
And their relationship has grown too.
I have grown a lot in my ability to talk to her, and she does come to me with a lot of problems and a lot of concerns and a lot of stressors. And I think that's because we've learned how to communicate better through all of this.
Yeah, it's a nice story. And I must say, Tracy and Amy have done quite well.
They've also done a nice job of sharing some of the wisdom they've gained along the way, including being open about the things that they wish they'd done a bit differently.
And we have 3 more stories still to come.
3 more amazing moms, each with a unique story to tell.
We'll be back soon.
This podcast has been brought to you by the Dartmouth Trauma Interventions Research Center, hosted by Erin Barnett and Becky Parton. Special thanks to all of our guests. Editing by Kay Jankowski, Erin Barnett, and Becky Parton. Script development, audio production, and music composition by Chris Trimble and Treehouse Audio Productions. Please see the show notes for more information.